This is a relay project.
Real Talk starts right now. Here's Ryan Jesperson.
You know, one of the best things about hosting a talk show, or I hope, listening or watching a talk show, being a part of a talk show like Real Talk, is an interview happens and then it prompts questions and it gets people thinking, and then it prompts emails and feedback and tweets and DMs and more conversation. And then the next thing you know, we're going down avenues of different conversation, learning more things, expanding our knowledge, man. That's exactly where this episode of Real Talk is going. Johnny, are you ready to expand your knowledge, man?
Oh, man.
Why
are you talking like this morning?
I don't know. I just feel good today. I'm wearing flannel. We're comfortable. We've got an innovator on the show today that I think is going to blow our minds. But what I love about this is that you're about to meet an Alberta-based innovator that's doing really impressive things in Canada's energy industry. And this is a spin-off of our conversation, our exclusive. You might have heard about it. We've talked about it a couple of times. Our sit-down with the Right Honourable Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, on February 21st. Well, he said a lot of things that got a lot of people thinking. Some people have been humming and hawing over his comments, and some people have been just pissed off, believing that the Prime Minister unfairly characterized or perhaps misunderstands what's happening in the province of Alberta. This is a tale as old as time, of course. But when the PM came on and talked about how Alberta oil companies haven't had the backs of oil sands workers because they haven't been preparing for the future, and they haven't been investing in tech and innovation to prepare Alberta's energy industry for yet more prosperity in the decades to come. It lit a fire under a bunch of you, including, and I'm not going to use her name, but a real talker who sent us an email. She works in something in the government of Alberta. I'm not even going to identify exactly where she works because it's so high up the chain that it might become obvious who this person is. And I believe that she's writing in confidence, just trying to ensure that the quality of our conversations and the depth of our understanding on these issues is, well, frankly, deeper than any other talk show goes. And so I'm grateful for that. I'm going to read the email in just a second, and then we're going to learn a little bit more. We're going to get a tale from the other side of the coin, another perspective, a different take on what's happening in Alberta's energy industry. And if everything goes according to plan, it will get us thinking even more and seeking to understand even more about what's happening in oil and gas and other energy ventures across the country, where the brightest minds are going, what they're working on, and what the future really looks like when it comes to Canada's energy sector. Let me tell you this, we wouldn't be having the conversation without Business Career College this morning, and they have a very clear and simple message to those of you that are ready for something different. You're looking for a new opportunity, a rewarding and high-paying career, but here's the rub, here's the thing. You don't have an insurance degree. The best news is you don't need any university degree. You don't need any post-secondary degree at all to get started with an insurance professional with Business Career College. You know, in Canada, insurance agents are starting around 60 grand a year and soon making close to six figures. All you need to do is take an approved course and then pass a licensing exam. Business Career College offers industry-leading approved courses in life insurance, property and casualty insurance. Plus, they've got expert instructors that are absolutely passionate about helping you launch your new career. Let's level up your career. Choose your designation online at businesscareercollege.com. Here's the best part, because you're hearing about this on Real Talk. You're going to save 15% off any insurance course with Business Career College when you use the promo code Real Talk. That's all one word, Real Talk, at businesscareercollege.com. So we talked to Prime Minister Trudeau. We talked for about 35 minutes. We covered a lot of ground. I know for a lot of you, we didn't cover enough ground. We appreciate your feedback. We'll get to more of your emails here. I mean, honestly, we wouldn't keep reading them if they didn't keep plopping into our inbox. We're getting dozens and dozens days after the PM's appearance here on Real Talk. But it was this one that jumped out. We'll call her Randi, not her real name, but we have verified the validity of the email, the validity of the job that Randi does.
Okay.
Johnny, funny. We fact-checked it. This is the exact kind of email from the exact kind of audience member that you want. And Landy says, Jespo, I work in a newly established secretariat. We're going to call it, let's say, sustainability, emissions reductions, and innovations. That's the general themes here within the government of Alberta. I won't say specifically where. And prior to that, I've worked in, different environment and protected areas, applications in different levels of politics. So you can imagine my surprise, says Landy, when the Prime Minister of this country comes on your show and pretends that TIER, that's TIER. Remember Sarah Hoffman mentioned this in our conversation with her, the aspiring NDP leader, Alberta NDP leader, pretended that TIER, the large emitters tax that's paid for by the oil industry that directly funds emissions reduction and energy transition innovation. Imagine my surprise when he pretended like that just didn't exist. Landy says, no, I'm going to spare you a rant, but you need to get Kevin Krausert on your show from Avatar Innovations to immediately combat the outrageous lies, says Landy, that you allowed our Prime Minister to spout on your show. I mean, I don't love the I allowed it part, but Landy, I love that you made the guest recommendation, and you wouldn't believe this, that Kevin Krausert's been on our radar for a while, as a matter of fact. This guy's doing really interesting things. He describes himself as an entrepreneur, a dreamer, and a scientist. You can find out more about what he does at avatarinnovations.energy. So he's been in the energy industry for basically 25 years on the front lines in different leadership and executive roles. He started as a roughneck on the rigs up in northern Alberta, became chief executive of Canada's oldest drilling company. He began through the course of COVID, Canada's first energy technology venture studio and Calgary's first energy venture capital fund, backed by some of the largest energy companies in the world, as CEO of Avatar Innovations, and he's making his Real Talk debut today. Kevin, I want to welcome you to the show, and thanks for making time for us. It's good to see you.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. Thank you for having me. I've been a fan of your work and your show for quite some time, so it's a real honor to be here.
Well, we appreciate that, and you know that here on the show we want to have informed conversations and better understand issues, and we love when people come on the show and share their opinions and give us ideas of where they're coming from, but sometimes when those opinions land in ways that other people feel like they or their industries are being unfairly represented, we want to make sure that we hear from that other side as well. So we'll get into some of the key moments from our conversation with the Prime Minister, but I know that you watched it. What was your general impression? What were some of the takeaways you had after watching that?
Well, I'll leave my comments to the areas of energy and climate that he spoke about. But in terms of that, it struck me as perhaps a little naive on the challenges in front of us, perhaps a little misinformed on what's actually going to need to be done to get the types of projects he's hoping for built, and a little disrespectful in terms of the work that myself and countless other executive and frontline energy workers that I have the privilege of working with are undertaking.
Okay, so we put this out to you. You and I have been corresponding behind the scenes, and I basically said to you, let us know which comments in particular you want to address. But Kevin, I don't want to take for granted, I don't want to assume that every single person that's going to hear this podcast or watch us on YouTube has seen the whole Trudeau interview. So we're going to play a quick clip. This is a portion of the Prime Minister on Real Talk. It was coming up on a week ago. It was February 21st. Here he is talking in particular about the energy industry, including some of the big players right here in Alberta.
Governments should get out of the way of Albertans actually innovating and creating that better future that they can work and build and deliver. If you can build a pipeline for oil sands oil, you can build a pipeline for hydrogen. If you can build the technology necessary for an oil sands refinery, you can build the technology necessary for a hydrogen plant. These are things that Albertans will have great jobs in the future if the Alberta government gets out of its ideological opposition to doing things that are good for workers, good for the planet, maybe not good for classic oil sands companies, except that they're also investing massively in decarbonization and renewables. This is the dynamic that, quite frankly, Albertans are getting fooled by right-wing politicians on.
I can already hear Premier Smith's response to this and the oil company's CEO's responses to this. And they're going to say, did Justin Trudeau just tell us that government ideology needs to get out of the way of innovation in the oil sands? And I know that they're going to tear their hair out because
absolutely.
They feel that it's you that's been imposing liberal ideology onto the oil sands.
So what if we impose on the oil sands?
You know what? We got literally dozens, if not hundreds of questions people wanted us to ask you. And a lot of people working in traditional oil and gas still don't believe, as much as you pound on this table, as much as you talk about the personal political risk that you took investing in TMX, they don't feel like you've had the industry's back. They don't feel like you've had Alberta's back. And I don't
think the oil industry has had the back of the oil sands workers. I don't think the industry, by dragging its heels on decarbonization in some sectors. Some of the oil sands companies have been really innovative and are leading the way on that, and that is great. And we are encouraging them, and we're investing with them, and we're supporting them in decarbonization investments. But those who are crossing their hands and saying, you know what, the world's still going to need oil for another decade or so, another few decades. It's still going to need every drop that we can produce. So why would we raise our costs right now and invest in innovation when we can just do the same things we've been doing for decades and make profits? And the fact that we're going to leave people with a dirty mess and no jobs because we haven't prepared for the jobs of the future, well, that's a problem for the next generation in this community. My job as a company, as a shareholder, is to draw profits out right now. That is what is hurting oil sands workers, and they've been fooled by people who are saying, oh, no, the climate change is a liberal or a Chinese plot. You don't have to worry about it. Just keep doing things exactly as they were a decade ago, 2 decades ago. That's not preparing for the future that Albertans, like all Canadians, know is changing.
All right, so that's probably the 2 minutes that got the most attention from that interview. Kevin, it's nicely teed up for you. What did you specifically want to comment on?
Boy, there's sure a lot to unpack.
We gave you about 100 things.
Yeah, I'll go with, I think, one of the first ones that I think struck a nerve with myself as well as many other in the industry. Any suggestion that the industry does not have the back of its workers is outrageous and insulting. I have spent my career in frontline positions in safety critical jobs, through to some safety management systems, through to executive roles in the oil and gas industry. From bottom to top of this industry, the one thing that gets every one of us up in the morning is the safety of our workers. We've come a long way for safety in the oil and gas industry, to the point that the Canadian oil and gas industry is one of the safest in the entire industry. Every meeting I'm in starts with a safety moment on how to make sure the workers in the front line are safe. Having worked in this industry for 25 years, I've known guys who've unfortunately passed away on roads in unsafe conditions. This is a weight that weighs heavily on not just myself, but everyone in this industry, to make sure that our frontline workers are safe from top to bottom. And to somehow suggest otherwise is fundamentally insulting. It is also disrespects the incredible work we've done as an industry to make the Canadian oil and gas industry the safest, if not the safest, anywhere in the world.
I don't want to take away from that, and I've never worked a day on a rig in my life, but I got more the impression that when he talks about how he doesn't have, or rather that oil companies don't have the backs of oil sands workers, my impression of what he's talking about is that they're not preparing them for the future. They're not preparing them for automation. They're not preparing them for innovation, transition off, traditional oil and gas, et cetera. Like, he's not looking out. The oil companies he's suggesting are not looking out for their long-term career prospects and prosperity. That's what I thought he was getting at.
Yeah, he might have, but it was a loaded sandwich, and so I wanted to get that one out of the way first, because it's the most important issue for anyone who works in the oil and gas industry. Second piece is on, if the assumption then is he's commenting on, are we preparing workers for the energy transition? I'm going to go with this in sort of 2 ways. There's probably about 20 drilling rigs right now that are not working in Alberta because we don't have the people. So first of all, what are we transitioning these people's jobs to? There's not enough workers as is. Talk to anybody in the industry. They're hiring. They can't find enough people. So first of all, what transition are we talking about? Because there's not enough people for jobs right now as is. The second piece, in terms of preparing people for the transition, I would like to remind him of the work that we are doing at Avatar, as well as having hosted several of his ministers in the energy transition in downtown Calgary, which is a working space for oil and gas workers to work alongside innovators, university researchers, and supported and funded by the oil and gas industry to start building the skills and the technologies that are going to be required in the future. Avatar, my company, we have now had about 4,000 applications from oil and gas professionals to participate in our programming. That is a curriculum whereby we work through the macro trends and threads of the energy transition: entrepreneurship, sustainable finance, energy economics, adaptability, technology competencies. And the 1,000 or so alumni that have gone through this program have seen their careers in the oil and gas industry and building up the skills for the energy transition. We just launched another cohort on Friday with an additional 200 individuals. And so these are oil and gas companies, true industry leaders like Cenovus and Suncor, who are investing not just with dollars, but with people to be driving the future of energy and ensuring that the skills that are going to be required in the future. So there already is this programming. We're very proud of it. Had you been at our event on Friday, you would have seen the lineup down the street to get in, because the 450-person theater was filled with oil and gas workers, executives. A roughneck, one of our alumni, drove in from a rig from the field for one of the events. This could, we are preparing people for the future of energy busily. Do we need to do more? Absolutely. But we'd love for the federal government to sort of step up to the table and say, okay, well, here's where the skills are going to be in the future. Here's the skills that we have right now. And how do we build those skills? And the oil and gas industry is doing it. We have 1,000 alumni who've already done it, and we're building more and expanding rapidly.
Okay. We're getting a lot of action in our YouTube live chat right now. People are saying, basically, the spirit of the comment is like, are we just going to pretend like we're not seeing the layoffs happening across the board? We're not seeing layoffs everywhere, despite record profits, or at least very fantastic quarterly results for a lot of these big international players. What would you say to those folks?
Well, the reality is, as we've always known in oil and gas, it's a cyclical business, and it's dependent upon the price of oil. And for us to maintain as a competitive industry, we need healthy companies that are generating return for their company. The sad reality of the oil and gas industry is that much of the employment of the industry is actually on the service side of the business. And having run a drilling company for my life and know what it feels like to have rigs laying down when the oil prices crash, that's a factor of our industry that allows it to sort of be competitive on a global basis. For us to be competitive, we need to be able to generate returns for global shareholders. And the way oil companies do that is by managing sort of activity. And again, I think that speaks to the need for an entrepreneurial activity and an entrepreneurial mindset of continuous education in our industry, such that, when the rig shuts down over breakup, or it shuts down because its prices have softened a little bit, where are the opportunities you're finding to build your value. Long gone are the days where an individual can take one training course, a certificate, and then be good for the rest of their career. What the skill that is actually needed in a rapidly evolving technology future is constant education and constant upskilling of your skills, and then working hard and using entrepreneurial principles to find it. So, I guess my answer to that is yeah, of course there's up and downs, and those are not necessarily driven by the energy transition. Those are driven by global pricing of commodities. But what we all need to do, and what the Alberta history has been, is find opportunities like Avatar training initiatives. Go and build out your network so that you're constantly finding new economic opportunities, and get to work. That's always been our spirit, but that is not much to do with the transition, in my opinion.
Okay, I want to just give our audience a chance to learn a little bit more about what you do. They can check out avatarinnovations.energy, Canada's first corporate venture studio, you claim, focused on decarbonization. You say you're an innovator in global energy transition. Avatar building a new energy future through leadership, entrepreneurship, collaboration, and capital. These are all the right words. You're using all the right words. So why do you think that, I'm not pointing the finger at you, Justin Trudeau didn't sit here and talk about Kevin Krausert, but you, let's say the collective you, the industry, why isn't it getting much credit from the PM, do you think?
I think that I don't know. He's well aware of the work that we're doing at Avatar. And it's not just words, right? And it's action. 1,000 alumni, portfolio of 42 energy transition technologies sponsored by oil and gas in various stages of development. Alberta's first energy transition venture capital fund with Synovus as our lead investor. He's well aware of these initiatives. What I understood from his comments is I think he's trying to find a simple excuse to why we're not running faster on major emissions reduction capital projects, such as hydrogen, carbon capture, biofuels, et cetera. While you've seen some phenomenal FIDs, there's been 3 FIDs, final investment decisions in the project in the past year on these types of emission reductions projects. The reality is the reason we're not moving faster on these isn't because of a willingness from the industry or an eagerness. It's in fact the exact opposite. It's finding the right investment climate to be able to make these investment decisions. So when I hear him say, well, it's time for government to get out of the way and allow the province to start innovating and building, I would respectfully say there's a number of key pieces that are in his court that can be done to ensure these projects go forward. First and foremost, to get any of these carbon capture projects on the books done, we need a legislated investment tax credit for carbon capture that has been in the planning phases for quite some time. No one is going to risk capital if they think that the economics of how they're doing it are not certain. We need certainty around carbon pricing, whether that's a carbon market contract for difference, anything along those lines. That is very much in the federal government's hand to sort of compete with. And then beyond, if he really wants Canada to be a world-class industrial global emissions technology and innovation player, there are many, many mechanisms that can be sort of brought to the forefront in terms of developing an entrepreneur-first piloting system as opposed to a government first. We need to create new incentives to demonstrate facilities. We need to incentivize early adopters to do first of kind projects. We need to correct the mismatch between risk return capital availability for some of these projects. There's solutions that are at the table to make sure Canada wins at this, but a lot of them are in his hands.
So how much of this do you think is politics getting in the way? Like how much of this is the Alberta government warring with the feds warring with the Alberta government, ideological differences that you might describe in divorce court as irreconcilable? How much of this do you think is politics kind of getting in the way?
Having the privilege, or I guess the misfortune, depending upon how you want to frame it, of working both with the federal government as well as the provincial government, and having worked with political parties of sort of all stripes, I really try and steer out of the politics and call a spade when it's a spade and call a win when it's a win. And realistically, behind the scenes, the conversations are more productive than I think the headlines would have you believe, in the sense that this is all parties want this to happen. However, the means of going about it are very much not in agreement. And that's what maybe gives me some encouragement. How can we create an energy system of the future that delivers a higher utility and a lower cost energy source fit for the future? And that is really the sort of crux of the decision. And I think there's some trust that sort of needs to be rebuilt as well. There's frankly broken trust. Nobody wants to take responsibility for why it's not working in their corner, but everybody wants to say point out why it's not working because of what the other corner is doing.
Sure, we see that all the time. But who broke whose trust, and how does that get rebuilt?
We actually had at our event on Friday where we had the 200 participants kicking off. We actually had a game show with Peter Terzakian, Managing Director of ARC Financial, and Dr. Mattia Romani, who was leading the COP28 negotiations on the $30 billion climate fund that was just announced. And that was one of the game show topics. And the winning answer from that game show is you do what you say, is how do you rebuild that trust? And so from the government saying, well, we're going to legislate carbon contracts for difference, create a certainty around carbon price, create a simplified regulatory environment, do it. And likewise on the oil and gas side, they need to get these projects going as well. Until that trust is rebroken between the two sides, until they both do what they say, it's going to be a difficult slog. But it's as simple as do what you say.
Yeah. Do you I'm going to ask you an oversimplified question, okay, just to get the point out, and then you do with it what you will. There's kind of two groups of people, I think, that are working in Canada's energy industry. And like I said, someone will write in and say, this is grossly simplistic. And I will say, you are correct. But if I introduce it as such, then you got to give me a break on it. There's the person working in Canada's energy industry that believes that Canada's emissions on a global scale are negligible, less than 2% of global emissions. They believe that if we take steps like, consumer carbon taxes, carbon pricing, emissions caps, whatever, it's really insignificant compared to China and India and the other big emitters. And they basically believe that all government action, climate action in particular, is bullshit. That's kind of one group. And then the other group is they've got great careers and they're doing great things, and they recognize that they're fueling this country, the economic engine, and literally getting people to work. They're helping people heat their homes. And they also recognize, just like Stephen Harper did and others, that there will be a horizon for the traditional oil and gas industry, and that Canada, and in particular Alberta, can remain Canada or one of the world's energy capitals, and that there's a bright future, and that could be wind and solar, and it could be hydrogen, and it could be a whole bunch of different things. But they believe that Alberta needs to be bullish and invest in those technologies now and be open to international investment and not impose moratoriums. And we need to be environmentally responsible, and we need to properly manage tailings ponds. And if they do that, they'll continue to work in the energy industry, and they'll encourage their kids to work in the energy industry, and they'll continue to do so proudly. Those are kind of the two people I see working in the industry, and both of them are working hard. But one of them has a bit more of a sustainability bend, and one of them has a little bit more of a profit, let's go now, worry about later kind of a bend. What do you make of my assessment? And here's the real one. What camp do you fall into?
We need both, is the reality. And I would probably say I fall into both camps. I'm a fourth generation.
You can't choose both.
Okay, well, I'll give you a third option then.
Okay, fair.
First, I just wanted to explain that I'm a fourth generation oil and gas worker myself. My great grandfather started building some of the first steam rigs in Turner Valley.
Amazing.
The oil and gas industry has been the lifeblood of my family and a lot of the opportunities and successes I've had in my life, and I want this to continue for more generations. And the reality is, and what I mean is, your financial short-termism versus and global insignificance of our emissions versus how we build the industry for the future. You actually need a third option, which is a coherent shareholder value creation thesis. So if you're just going to say, okay, we're just going to make our best quarterly returns right now and future be damned, and we're going to squeeze every cent out we can right now, and our emissions don't matter. Well, if you go too far on that analysis, then you stop drilling new wells. You stop reinvesting capital into sustaining production. And on the other hand, if you're looking too far down the road on some of these energy transition projects that might not make money for another decade, you're losing your ability to sort of compete in the sort of short-term world. So what is actually needed, and what I would say is the third option is needed, is an investor shareholder creation value, or a value creation thesis that allows investors and the public to truly believe that you're delivering energy security today while investing in the energy future of tomorrow. But the reality is that energy future of tomorrow is only going to work if it makes money. And so that is why we need technology and innovation on a scale that we've never had it before, to make sure that the new energy sources that are coming in, the new emissions reduction projects are coming in, are delivering a higher utility, lower cost energy source for people. That's why technology and innovation and the forums like we have at Avatar are delivering that future in new structures. And we're getting a lot of global attention because no other jurisdiction in the world has figured out how to do that. So I hope you don't see that as an escape on an answer, but the reality is you need both.
Yeah. Well, you took advantage of my admission that the question was flawed from the outset by being overly simplistic, and you ran with it. Hey, can we keep you for a little bit? Because I want to like sort of gather the audience around for some story time when we come back, Kev. We're going to pay a couple of our bills here talking about economic sustainability. If we don't do that, the show collapses. But when we come back, I want you to just like in layperson's terms, tell us about some of the cool things that are happening. Tell us about some of the things that are getting funded. I'm going to ask you about accusations around greenwashing. I've not seen people say it about your company, but in general, there is some skepticism around that, and that's not limited to Alberta nor Canada. More with Kevin Krausert coming up in just a little bit. We're talking about innovation in Canada's energy industry. Really, nobody's driving that more than Apex Automation right now, and they're putting out the call to skilled engineers that may be in particular drawn to this episode of Real Talk right now, people that have skills that have been working in different applications, maybe even working across pipelines, maybe in Alberta or across Western Canada, natural gas processing in Western Canada, chemical manufacturing. Shout out to Saskatchewan, Vancouver. Maybe you're one of those potash miners that's been living in Saskatchewan for the last while. You've seen automation introduced into your industry. You know there's a bright future there, but you want to be a part of it? Check out the careers link at apexautomation.ca. They're building a culture where people like you can do their best work. If you're looking to challenge yourself, learn new skills, you've come to the right place. Again, that's apexautomation.ca. If talking about transition in the energy industry is catching your attention, we want to direct you to kubienergy.ca. Kubi is literally always hiring. Literally always. As the busiest solar installer in Western Canada, they're always looking to add team members. You could be a journey person, electrician, you could be an apprentice, you could be an expert in sales, office management, HR, whatever it is, Kubi could use you in Kamloops, Lethbridge, Calgary, Edmonton, and beyond. You can check out their website to see more. Johnny right now on the screen showing us Canada's first net zero fire hall. Kubi just made that one happen. That is the sexiest solar installation I think I've ever seen. Check out the careers link to get your career started on Canada's green energy movement at kubienergy.ca. Our friends at Friesen Brothers want to have you sure to circle March 1st on your calendar. That's the next day that they're going to be knocking 15% off all grocery purchases of $75 or more. It's just one of the many things that Friesen Brothers is doing to make life more affordable for Alberta families. You know, they're still family owned. Unbelievable. Coming up on 70 years. This institution, Alberta grown, Alberta owned, and Friesen Brothers through the month of February, proud to support the MAZ, we call it. That's the Mazankowski Alberta Heart Institute through the University Hospital Foundation. You can learn more about what they're doing there by checking out friesen.com/Heart Month. And before we get back to Kevin, a quick note to those of you that are going to get serious. You're promising yourself you're going to get serious about decluttering, about getting organized. Let me tell you a quick 30-second story. When we went to California Closets and requested that free consultation, this was honestly coming up on 10 years ago. Johnny, I had my cufflinks mixed in with my tie clips, mixed in with my socks, mixed in with my Listerine breath strips, mixed in with my favorite pens. I couldn't find anything. We needed to get our closet organized, and they delivered. Now I got all my ties properly stored, my belts, my pants are hanging nice and neat next to the blazers, right where you'd want them. And Carrie's closet has a freaking chandelier in it.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah. California Closets will answer whatever you ask them to do. Plus, their team has great ideas on their own, stuff you would never think about, like chargers in drawers. How cool is that? Consultations are always free at californiaclosets.ca. Kevin Krausert's hanging out with us. He's the CEO and co-founder of Avatar Innovations. You can check out avatarinnovations.energy if you want to learn more. We'll put that in the show notes. Tell us about this thing you've got going. You basically, it's not an accelerator, but you open up basically kind of a competition type thing every year to try to move sustainability and innovation forward in the energy industry. How does it all work?
Yeah, we've got there's sort of three legs to the Avatar stool. The first is energy technology, entrepreneurship, and leadership development program. In it, hundreds of oil and gas workers from across the industry, across North America, come together where they race across 14 weeks and come up with an energy technology idea, if you will. Listen to some global speakers. We had the Premier speak on Friday. We had Peter Terzakian speak. This week we've got a whole bunch of successful entrepreneurs speaking as well. But they generally are tasked with coming up with an energy technology idea, from hydrogen to carbon capture to sustainable fuels to methane emissions reductions technologies. At the end of that 14 weeks, they pitch their concepts back to our corporate sponsors. As I was mentioning before, Suncor, Cenovus, Imperial, Tourmaline, Spartan Controls, National Bank. And then the corporates choose the technologies for priority development that are of interest to them. So that's the second leg of the stool, the studio, through our partnerships with the University of Calgary, University of Alberta, and Texas A&M. They get a little bit of pre-seed capital and go and prototype it, see if there's a there. And then at the end of that exhaustive 20 weeks, should there be good fundamental science, product market fit, we then sort of hand over the technology into a newco, and then through our venture capital fund, we'll place seed stage investments behind it. But because the technologies have been built inside the industry capable of scaling them, they've been reaching market at record pace. We had a remote methane monitoring technology that went from concept to commercial pilot with a major midstream operator in less than 12 months. That's not only breakneck speed from a tech dev perspective, it's also breakneck speed from an industry perspective. By working with the professionals inside the industry who are able to identify their problem areas as well as their solution areas, with things that the industry is really good at, we're building not just technologies at record pace, we're also building the workforce for the energy future.
Can you give us an example of something that's come out of this program? Like, can you dumb it down, put it into layperson's terms so we can understand it? Something that's really cool that went from sort of the conceptual stage and is either all the way through it or very close to being implemented, that you think will make a demonstrable difference when it comes to the basically the environmental footprint of the energy industry?
Yep. I'll give you three, actually. There's a few that I can't because they're under deep confidentiality agreements, but three that I think are pretty cool that explain the power of what we're doing. One of the methane team that I was talking about, obviously, as any Albertan knows, that remote information or data in remote work sites is really difficult to get, let alone the massive amounts of data that's going to be needed to monitor fugitive methane emissions. They came up with a really cool relay system that can sort of pinpoint methane emissions and then deliver the signal across 20 or 30 kilometers. Another one, which is really cool, is breakthrough hydrogen production technique. When we produce renewable natural gas, like when you take biomass and put it in a tank and let it rot, produces natural gas. That's called renewable natural gas, which is a carbon zero footprint. You're only getting about 60% of the gas out of that's actually in there. They came up with a really cool technology that can actually juice that to about 90%. So increasing the amount of renewable natural gas that we can produce. And the one that's actually probably furthest along, that's actually in the process of building a pilot with a Calgary brewery right now, is taking oil and gas carbon capture technology and then modularizing it and putting it on a brewery. When you make beer, you take your wheat and your hops and you ferment it, but all that CO2 goes into the atmosphere, and then they go and buy food grade CO2 and use it to carbonate the beer. So a net zero beer. Not exactly solving the energy transition, but certainly a fan favorite in the Avatar orbit.
Well, it's a neat idea. It gets people's attention because anything to do with like our sin industries, like the sin type, anything to do with booze. I'm an investor in cannabis. Everybody knows that. All the fun stuff. It grabs people's attention because it's kind of neat, and who wouldn't want to purchase or drink or for that matter brew a net zero beer? Obviously, the overall impact may be negligible, but I think it proves that technology is implementable. You think there's an appetite for it from industry? In other words, can it be scaled up in a meaningful way?
Yes, I think this group, they've got like 12 or 13 LOIs with Alberta breweries. So clearly there is a desire and a passion to be moving, and it's actually more of a CO2 security play than it is actually an emissions play, because food grade CO2 has been getting quite expensive. But the point that I think is actually more relevant, especially circling back to our previous comment, is the transferability of those skills. Those were chemical engineers working in oil and gas who figured out how to apply an oil and gas technology to, a funner industry, if you will. And so that's what I'm sort of getting at, is that they're transitioning workers for some sort of uncertain future. You have to build the skills like adaptability and resilience, because nobody can predict what the future actually is. And that's what we're doing at Avatar, and that's what the oil and gas industry is investing heavily in, to make sure it happens.
Okay. One of the episodes of Real Talk that I'm really proud of, it was back on December 7th of last year. So whatever that is, like 3 months ago-ish, approximately. We talked to the federal environment minister, Stephen Guilbeault, who was live in Dubai at that moment. He checked in from COP28. No big deal. And then on the heels of that interview, we checked in with another federal cabinet minister, Randi, the jobs minister, who joined us. And the reason I bring up that interview is because, and the reason why I thought that episode was particularly interesting is that I think everybody kind of knows where Stephen Guilbeault stands on a lot of things. He's made his comments about no new roads, which the Prime Minister touched on in our interview last week. Guilbeault obviously is sort of like, when it comes to the spectrum of the action that people believe Canada needs to take on climate change, he would be one of those that believes that Canada needs to take pretty serious action on climate change. And then back to back, not to suggest that Boissonnault doesn't feel the same way, but Randi Boissonnault came on the show and he praised Pathways Alliance. He praised 6 of the biggest players in the oil sands coming together and working to reduce the carbon footprint, to work on carbon capture technology, et cetera, et cetera. People can, again, check that out. I loved what we called that. We called that episode Cap That. Yeah, Cap That is what you're looking for in our podcast archives. So what does it tell you about the federal government, where you got the jobs minister that says the Pathways Alliance initiative is very important and significant? We've got the industry players in on it. You got the federal environment minister, who I don't think really many folks in Alberta working in the energy industry would see eye to eye with. How do you wrap your mind around that, the perspective of the federal government moving forward, and what do you think the oil industry needs to do to be able to work with government on establishing policy that's going to keep Canadian jobs, keep Canadian prosperity, and also keep Canada doing what it needs to do as a climate leader?
Talk about another loaded question. I try and stay out of the palace intrigue of what's happening behind closed doors. I do speak with ministers of all different jurisdictions. Sometimes we give conflicting information as well. What I will say is you have to provide an argument and a conversation around the value that initiatives like Pathways and other initiatives the oil and gas industry is working with aligns with the values of their jurisdictions, if you will. So, when I'm speaking with federal Liberals, I'm sort of talking about emissions reductions and how to fix the innovation system. When I speak with Conservative politicians, it's all about how do we use these innovations to unleash jobs and economic opportunity. So, getting back to sort of, I think the heart of the matter is what is actually needed to be able to get things done. Unfortunately, the emissions cap, I think, is going to have the opposite effect of what it's intending to do, in the sense that it's undoubtedly throwing a new layer of uncertainty onto the industry that will be fought out through the courts. And what reasonable investor is going to say, you know what we should do? Let's invest billions on this court case. It's just not going to happen. And so in the meantime, the work that I'm advocating for is how do we fix Canada's innovation system? Canada has the highest government R&D spend in the G7. Yet we have the second lowest innovation index. What we needed to figure out as a country is how to make our innovation system work. We have exceptionally bright people. We have exceptionally committed industries. We need to be looking at new financial investment systems to unlock private capital. We can't just keep going back to subsidy as the only answer in the energy transition. We need to be looking at technology and innovation. We need to be building bridges with international investors that are looking at this space. The speaker we had on Friday, Dr. Matteo Romani, he's working closely with the CEO of Altaras, which is the $30 billion climate technology fund that the Emiratis announced at COP28. Their CEO used to live in Calgary. These are the type of bridges that we actually need to be building. And actually, I want to give Danielle Smith a shout out, because I think she's very much on the right track on this concept around the sovereign wealth fund.
Let me ask you about, this is a question from Travis in our live chat. He says, speaking of innovation, he says he'd be curious for your take on the impact of the provincial government's moratorium on wind and solar development. I'm not sure that's 100% your wheelhouse, but that certainly is innovation in the energy space. What do you think something like that does through industry? What do you think that does to perhaps dampen or cool international investment interest? And what do you think it does to Alberta's reputation?
Wind and solar certainly aren't my wheelhouse in being an expert. I'm not totally comfortable commenting.
But you probably have an opinion on the moratorium, generally speaking.
Well, it's coming off here, in 2 days? I'm going to hold my judgment until it is coming off here in 2 days. But it was a booming industry. It speaks to Alberta's environment. My understanding is it is not slowed down investment all that much on the pause that it was, and the projects were continuing to be evaluated. Let's see what they come out with here in a couple of days. If you want to have me back, I can do a little more research, but we got 48 hours to wait until what the new version is.
Yeah, we'll see what comes of it. I can't imagine that it didn't stop investment. I mean, I think inherently it stopped investment, but we'll see what the longer term impact of it was. You're right. I mean, it may be too soon to rule on it. The government obviously took a position. You don't need to sit here through my university lecture on this, but they kind of took the position that it was the Wild West out there with what was being approved, and they needed to get a handle on it. We'll see what they deliver when it comes to the facts on this after the matter is settled. Kevin, appreciate you making time for us. If people want to learn more about what your team is doing, they can check out the show notes on the podcast or on YouTube, or just directly punch avatarinnovations.energy into their search. We've been talking to Kevin Krausert, CEO and co-founder of Avatar, named by the Globe and Mail just last year as one of the top 50 global change makers working in Canada. Thanks for doing this. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, you got it. Thanks, Kev. I appreciate that. I know not everybody agrees with what Kevin had to say. That's perfectly fine. You know what? When I think people often say, like, how long do you guys think you'll do Real Talk for? I mean, the quick answer is
100 years.
Forever. Obviously, forever is the answer. But I think that you and I could both agree that once everybody starts agreeing on everything, we're done.
Yeah.
We're out.
We want people to be, we're not divisive, but we want to have, back and forth here. And I can see people in the chat today are back and forth on it. So that's great. But
that's good. I mean, we got people working in the energy industry that quite rightfully want to have their voice represented.
Sure.
Now, whether or not you could work in the energy industry, and maybe someone will write into us and say, well, he doesn't represent my voice. Send us an email to talk@ryanjesperson.com. We're going to get to more of your emails. You're going to go, how long are they going to talk about this fucking Trudeau interview? Probably for as long as you guys
keep mailing
as long
us.
as you guys keep talking about it. We'll keep talking about it. I keep getting stopped on the street. I was at the Oilers game last night, and everybody wanted to talk about it. Everybody had questions about it. Everybody wants to know behind the scenes, what was it like? And so we're obviously happy to continue to focus on that and talk about that.
I saw you're with Ian Hanneman.
Yeah, hey, buddy. I want to tell you a little story about that coming up in just a second. But first, I wanted to let you know, of course, that the program, this episode of Real Talk, is happening with the support of amazing partners like our friends at Complete Care Restoration. We're talking to, we know a lot of those of you in the northern parts of Canada, whether it's Northwest Territories, Yukon, BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, will be catching this episode to hear what Kevin has to say. That's where a lot of Complete Care's team members are working right now. Why? Because a lot of communities in the northern parts of Canada, these are a lot of the oil communities, oil and gas communities, are also ones that are impacted by wildfire. You can draw a direct line there if you like or not. I'm not here to draw those lines. What I'm here to do is to point out that when you're surrounded by boreal forest, oftentimes wildfire takes on a whole new meaning, and it has a whole level of immediacy to you. The team at Complete Care Restoration, they're all about rebuilding communities, restoring properties, rebuilding peace of mind. And that's what they're doing right now, literally working through the winter to get people back into their homes. They're rebuilding entire neighborhoods. It's unbelievable what they're doing, and they take every project personally, like it's their own investment. We give them 2 thumbs up. We've worked directly with them. You can find them online at completecarerestoration.ca. If you're not recovering from disaster, but you're still looking to get shovels in the ground on your biggest investment on your home this spring or summer, and a landscaping project is in the plans, look no further than Eden Landscaping, a custom builder with more than 20 years of experience in Edmonton and area. So you go, okay, well, there's a lot of landscaping companies out here. My son just started. My nephew just started Are you going to be his first project? Don't do it. Don't do it. Go with the guys that know exactly what they're doing on excavation and retaining walls and water features, irrigation, drainage. You don't want to mess this stuff up. Mike and his team, they're great listeners. They've got brilliant design minds, and they're perfect at working with budgets. We can tell you that much because we've worked with them. You can get that conversation started with Eden Landscaping today. Get to the top of the line, the front of the line when it comes to shovels in the ground this spring by visiting them at landscapeedmonton.ca. And Johnny, we're excited on behalf of our friends at Grand Dog Essentials Quality Raw Food to tell you about a new partnership they're proud to offer. This is a really, really neat things happening at Grand Dog, including the CK9 Ultimate lineup, Ultimate Beef, including tripe, complete chicken. When we say complete, we mean the bones, the organs, everything that your dog or cat needs. They've got duck. Johnny, they've got kangaroo and boar. They've got a sample box, man. Woo! The animals are getting what they need. You can check out the Shop Now link to see all the products, including the supplements that Grand Dog Essentials offers for your dog and cat, delivered to your door in Calgary, Edmonton, and Central Alberta. Don't forget the promo code REALTALK knocks 10% off your first time order.
Shouts out to Garth LaBeach and your buddy Graham Doty for their super chat donations today. Graham
Doty, sure appreciate him. Graham Doty was once my personal trainer, and that guy is a Canadian Masters champion in rowing. And if you ever need
like
someone,
Trudeau.
Yeah. Jeez. If you ever need somebody to absolutely put you through the ringer, let me know. I know a guy. We sure appreciate that from Graham. And you know what I noticed? Something I did notice Graham's contribution in the super chat there. We sure appreciate it. And a shout out to Garth as well. But Graham said something like, where was it? I have to scroll back through all these comments. It's amazing. But Graham basically said support your favorite shows, support your podcast, sign up on Patreon. There he says become a Patreon supporter of Real Talk and proudly support independent media. Graham, we sure appreciate that. You know what? Actually, I'm going to read these Trudeau emails, but let me read this. This is from Carrie. Carrie with a C. She wrote into us, earlier this month and said, I wanted to commend you, Jespo, and Johnny. Says, I'm a longtime listener. You know what? I probably don't do enough is there's all these lines in these emails. People say, shout out to Johnny, shout out to Johnny. I should be forwarding these all to you so you can see them.
Well, I hate praise.
Yeah, you do. Johnny's actually terrible at accepting praise. He why? No, I'm serious. If you're hey, Johnny, great job on that. He'll get up and go and fill up his coffee mug. He changes the He's like, hey, do we need some floor stuff? Anyway, so sit here and listen to this, Hicks. Carrie says, the reason I tune into Real Talk is to access real talk across a broad spectrum of topics. A couple things that have stood out to me lately in light of your conversation regarding the slashing of jobs at Bell Media. Remember that 4,800 jobs cut, what was it, a week and a half ago? Carrie says, what if we're wrong? What if that model is dying off in favor of a more resilient, cost-effective way? I don't know. She says, I'm not in the media. I spent over a decade working for government, and I also successfully ran a small business that employed over a dozen people for a number of years. And I think that those contrasting experiences help me see both sides, public services for the common good and numbers. What if we're seeing a shift because of the demand for how we consume information is changing? I think you're onto something, Carrie. Carrie says, I'm 45 and I wouldn't sit down to watch a news broadcast or read the newspaper. I don't even have a cable subscription. Our family of 4 got rid of that years ago. Instead, I turn to multiple sources like your show where I can source informed voices and facts. I believe in science. I don't believe everything I hear. I consider myself smart enough to apply a smell test to what I consume. I like that. Carrie says, which leads me to my point. How many of your customers, because that's what we are, truly appreciate that you're a small business owner? There's no matched RSP contributions, no paid holidays, benefits like dental for your boys. I'm guessing you took a pay cut of half of what you used to make. Incorrect. How often do customers and consumers really give thought to how you're funded and what your expenses are like? I appreciate that, Carrie. Says, as we enter a new era of media, like it or not, if we value receiving content from providers like you, then we sure as hell better pay for it. So I'll spell this out as clearly as possible from a thankful listener. Support this show with your hard-earned dollars. Every dollar counts. I promise I didn't write this, John. Every dollar counts. Become a Patreon member. If you can't afford, cut something you don't value as much. Consider this, Real Talk, similar to Netflix or Spotify or Prime or YouTube Premium. And keep up the great work, guys. Love from Carrie with a C.
Beautiful.
Shout out to Carrie. I love that.
Love it.
And like you mentioned, I wanted to give a shout out to a Patreon member. This is somebody who told me yesterday that he believes that he has caught more than 90% of our episodes since inception.
Wow.
Okay? Says he believes he's caught more than 90% of our episodes since inception, so I suspect that he'll probably hear this as well. I heard this over dinner last night. Shameless name drop coming. But you know, Ian Hannamansing, the most handsome, talented, silky smooth-voiced news anchor in all of Canada, in all the land. The anchor of the National.
90% of our
Now, I'm not
episodes?
talking about Ian. Here's the twist. Here's the twist. So Ian loves Real Talk.
Yeah.
Ian listens to Real Talk. I suggest everybody watch the National. And we're pals. And so we took our boys to the hockey game. We took our boys for dinner last night at the hockey game.
Beautiful.
And Ian's son, James, who's a chip off the old block, by the way, handsome fella, and he has the voice to match.
Yeah.
James Hannamansing, who's right in our wheelhouse, young, sharp guy, actually called Vancouver home for the majority of his life, but he's living in Edmonton right now. Let us know that through the course of the pandemic, he was listening to a ton of podcasts. He said he was listening to Smart List, and he was listening to Conan O'Brien's podcast.
I listened to Smart
all
List
these
on the way here
pods.
today, yeah.
Such a good show.
Yeah, great.
And he discovered Real Talk.
Yeah.
And he said that he connected with it, and I wanted to tell you how cool it was. James said he signed up for Patreon just so he could support Real Talk.
That's amazing.
On Patreon. How cool is that?
That's awesome. 90% of the shows that we had this conversation the other day, we were
amazing.
We looked at our YouTube, we looked at our Podbean, we looked at our Spotify, Apple, we looked at everything. Are we doing things right? And one of the things we started discussing, and I'll just let like a little window for the audience, was do we have too much content?
Yeah. Are we doing too much?
Are we pushing out too much? Every day is a short, a highlight, 3 Twitter things go up, a reel episode. On Friday, you get the bonus with the flamethrower.
Yeah.
So for someone to listen to 90% of it, that is no small
Well, we
feat.
told people I think it was about 2 years ago. It was right around the time you started with us. We cut our shows from 2.5 hours to like an hour 15, and people were like, "Hey, what's up? We miss it. Why is the?" And I thought, you know what, guys? Honestly, we're doing like 8 hours a week.
Yeah.
And that's a lot for most people to listen to.
People can't do it.
The hardcore fans, even the hardcore fans were saying, we can't catch it all.
No.
And we're leaving a lot on the table. So we try to give you like the best hour of the day. I love this from Kimberly in the chat. Says, did everybody see the beautiful sights of Jasper Monday night on The Bachelor? Ooh. Says, when that guy in the pub was on, I thought 100%. I bet Ryan knows him. Kimberly, I love that you checked it out. Yeah. The Eyes of the World, Bachelor Nation on Jasper last night. How cool is that?
It was awesome.
Yeah. I wanted to read some more of these emails. We'll make this quick. But Michael wrote, and we read this. How much we appreciate the time that you take to listen to and watch the shows and send us your thoughts to talk@ryanjesperson.com. Michael said, out of Victoria, BC, by the way, shout out to Victoria this morning, our audience there, said the interview with Trudeau was really good. Got me thinking. History shows us that Canadians rarely elect a government to a 4th term. Michael says the last time it happened involved a leadership change from Lester B. Pearson to Pierre Trudeau. And I think it's the same situation now. He says, I imagine the Conservatives will win if the Liberals stick with Justin Trudeau as their leader. He says, but my caveat is that Justin is perhaps more persuasive than his father. Trudeau Sr. did come across as an elitist. Justin, a bit more a man of the people. That from Michael in Victoria, BC. We'll see. He sure doesn't sound like he's ready to trigger a leadership change, does he? By the way, I know this is a bit random. But speaking of leadership elections and leadership races, tomorrow, that'll be Wednesday. That's going to be the 28th, is it, Johnny? It's the 28th of February coming up. Jody Callahoon-Stonehouse will join us in studio. We're going to sit down with her and pick her brain. She wants to be Alberta NDP leader, first term MLA. But if you've ever had the pleasure, I don't care how you feel about politics. I don't care who you vote for. She is like fire. She's pure energy. And I'm looking forward to having, she brings just a mammoth personality into any room that she enters. I think it's fair to call her a force of nature. The type of, I don't care, I'm not talking partisan, I'm not talking specific policy or platform, which we will learn more about tomorrow. But Jody Callahoon-Stonehouse is the type of person that we need more of in politics. And so she's definitely, is this fair for me to say? She's an underdog. She's an underdog in this race for sure. That'll probably be my lead question to her, but I'm looking forward to chatting with her. Ken wrote into us. This is going to be an earmuffs kids type email. He said, my wife and I were going into our late 30s before we decided to have our child. And while we've been together for a very long time, we held off on having kids because of two things, climate change and the cost of childcare. He says, I believe that Justin Trudeau and the Liberals are the best bet right now to tackle the issue of climate change. He says, when I talked to the NDP and the Green candidates, federally speaking, in my riding last election, both snubbed their noses at the development of Canada's fission reactor network. Ken, I don't know anything about that. He says, and they didn't even know what nuclear fusion was. The Liberals, I believe, are the only party that will further develop Canada's renewable energy network while working to build up new fission technology. We got to learn more about that. I don't know anything about that.
Yeah.
He says, as well as put money into the develop of fusion reactor research. You know, these are the types of emails I keep, and I just highlight them and I put them in a pile and I Google it when I have time. He says the Canada Child Benefit, meantime, has allowed my wife and I to place our kid into a quality daycare system that's loving, has great educational, developmental programming. Without the subsidy, my wife or I would have to quit our job, which would endanger our ability to maintain housing or lower our quality of life or affect our ability to care for our kid, who we love. And with both of us working, we can equally contribute to society through taxes and production, all while knowing our child is in a safe and caring space. Ken says Polyev doesn't believe in climate change. He probably doesn't even know what CO2 is, let alone how it absorbs and re-emits infrared radiation, or that CO2 molecules can stay in the atmosphere for up to 1,000 years. I didn't know that. He says, and he's publicly stated that people like my wife and I don't need the Canada Child Benefit, that we need to pull up our bootstraps and work harder to care for our child. He says, fuck Pierre Polyev. He and his ilk are actively trying to sabotage my family's quality of life and our kids' future. Trudeau has his faults for sure, says Ken, and his tenure thus far has been a shadow of his father's, but he is the best bet moving forward for my family. That's nice. Ken's perspective. This from Randi, also in Victoria. Love our audience in BC. Says, I just want to say how much I enjoyed the interview with the Prime Minister. I spent my working life in Alberta. I never really understood the hate of the Trudeau name. Should we get into it? Says, I know he isn't perfect, just like all of us, but he sounded very level-headed and caring, much more so than the Conservative leader who comes across like a real bully. That from Randi with an I in Victoria. Thanks for that, Randi.
Somebody gave me the Coles notes on fission the other day. Basically, it's another form of nuclear. It's less expensive to produce, and it produces more energy per whatever the rate is, but it downside is it more radioactive waste and stuff like that. So it's something people are looking into, but they got to do it safely.
I don't want everybody to roll their eyes on this, but when I think of nuclear, I literally just think of Homer Simpson. I think of like that's literally what I think of. And then there's really smart. I know someone just like shut the podcast off for sure, but we'll get these comments in our chat or get them in emails, and I want you to know that we don't ignore you. I want you to know that you are heard, because we'll get every time we're talking about like geothermal or hydrogen or any, and there's like all these amazing and really neat things happening. We have a hydrogen roundtable coming up in like next 6 weeks or so. It's going to blow your mind, I guarantee. I've been trying to like school up so I can properly host it, but it's really neat stuff. But people are always leaving comments. What about nuclear? What about nuclear? And every time I go, yeah, you know what? We need to get more serious about learning about that.
Hey, if Homer can do it.
If Homer can do it.
But yeah, the difference is fission is splitting apart and fusion is bringing together. That's how I always thought of it. But yeah, somebody gave me the cold
What are
smokes
you,
the
like
other day.
physics 30,
No, I
like
asked,
90%?
It's so weird because I asked someone about it like 2 days ago because I was like, why is everyone talking about fission? And he was like, yeah, it's it's cheaper to produce and it gives you more energy, but the downside is it's a lot more radioactive. So dangerous stuff. You need someone better than Homer Simpson running it is what I'm saying.
Yeah, well, you know what we'll do? We need to do like in sort of, I don't know if you call it alternative energy. I guess that would be a fair one.
Yeah,
We'll do
like hydrogen. We need someone
we'll do like an alternative energy roundtable, like geothermal.
Yeah,
is another one, and I think one of the interesting points, and again, we're not experts, so we'll keep our comments limited here, so we don't really dumb down the pool. But one of the neat things, and I've interviewed people that are really bullish on geothermal and the future of that source of energy in Alberta, is that it maintains, it preserves, and actually creates jobs for skilled laborers. Like if you're a pipeliner, if you're a welder, if you're a driller, if you have those skills, those all translate into geothermal applications. So that's like one thing. That's not maybe the only reason why it could or could not be a good fit in Alberta, but it's certainly something. It's not insignificant, put it that way. Hey, before we go, look at this. Of course, our live chat is chiming.
Yeah, they're coming in. Fission.
Justin, like experts everywhere. Justin says fission is the principle that current reactors work on, and it's about splitting atoms to create energy.
It creates
fusion, he says, is the holy grail, where fusing two atoms together creates energy like a mini sun.
Yeah, like a nucleus.
Okay, yeah. Jamin, meantime, is pointing out abandoned wells, says there's no responsibility here. There's no innovation there. We've obviously talked a lot about abandoned wells, orphan wells on this show. You can, I mean, if you just want to Google like Mark Doran, Reagan Boychuk, you'll find those comments as well. Just Google those names in Real Talk Ryan Jesperson, or you can just scroll through our archives and find them there. Before we wrap for the day, there's a follow-up to a story that we covered. We talked to Wayne Wagner on the show. What was this, Johnny? I'll track down the date when you bring us the details at least. But a family in Saskatchewan had found a box.
A case.
Well, it was like a box of cases.
A case of boxes.
A case of boxes? Yes. However you want to look at it.
A large case with tons of boxes.
Of hockey cards. Yeah, is it a box of cases or a case of boxes? Anyway, they found a ton of unopened hockey cards that could contain and virtually guaranteed at least a few Wayne Gretzky rookie cards, and they put them up for auction.
Between 15 and 25, which is insane.
So cool.
Some of them sell for a quarter, half. I seen one go for $1.2 million. We have an update here. They have been sold. The family's super happy. Look at this. $5 million, over $5 million Canadian is what they got. It came down to an American and Canadian bidder. They were going back and forth. At one point, it was like $3,158,000. Then I looked again the next day. It was up at like $4 million. Eventually selling for $5 million. So that the family very happy, and the Canadian outbid the American. So if you care, these Wayne Gretzky rookie cards are staying in the country. So they're right here. They're stateside.
$5 million. So on January 30th, you can check out our conversation with Wayne Wagner from Wayne's Sports Cards and Collectibles, and he sort of explains to us he was hesitant to forecast what he thought this would sell for, but he wasn't afraid to start saying $3 million, $4 million. The thing that Wayne said, and he's like obviously the expert, I'm not. Wayne said the buyer of this needs to commit. I mean, you can do whatever you want. You know, you can buy new Ferraris and crash them if you want. But Wayne said the buyer of this needs to keep the box
closed.
Sealed.
Yeah, I couldn't believe
that.
that.
I don't know if I could do that.
He was adamant about like not opening them. And me and you, we talked to each other. We said, let's see if a dozen of these boxes. You're not going to open one box because inside a box is how many packs? I don't know, maybe 20 in there. You're not going to open one box and open one pack and just open one pack from inside that box, inside the case.
Yeah.
Like just and get the bubble gum out and see if there's mold on it and just like take a window back into history. How long ago were these things printed and packaged? I would
79.
I watch people on
44 years ago.
I watch people on TikTok. I'm going to reveal something here. Opening packs of hockey cards and from back in the day, like I've got a pack of 1997 Upper Deck baseball.
Fun.
And I just watched. They put them under a microscope and a ring light, and they have gloves on, and it's just, I don't know if it's like an ASMR thing, like the opening of the package, or just like an OCD thing, watching them so carefully go through them. But it's like a window back in time. You're opening something that 20, 25 years ago was packaged, and then when they get, oh, here's Roberto Alomar. I shouldn't bring that name up, but you know what I mean? They open something. They're like, oh, Yammer Yager, second season card. It's amazing. It gives me this feeling.
Drake does that all the time.
He does
Drake,
that too because he has the money to.
I'm not gonna lie. I just Googled ASMR. I had no idea what the hell you're talking about. What is
this?
it?
This is ASMR for our podcast listeners.
Autonomous sensory meridian.
This
response?
is ASMR. Ready?
Yeah.
Tonight I'm gonna be making broccoli with steamed rice.
What are you trying to do? Make us horny? What are you?
It's gonna be so good that I'm gonna lick down my throat.
Oh, jeez. Okay, I'm good.
It's
I'm good with
it's a
ASMR.
very subtle way of
good.
talking.
I don't know what the fuck's going on
Some people, it's their thing, right?
Okay, I got it. I learn something new from you every single day.
There are YouTube pages
Just one of
dedicated to this.
Oh, I bet there are. There's an entire Patreon account for someone that can whisper to you about broccoli.
God bless these kids who are making money in the most inventive ways.
It's kind of like what Carrie just wrote in and emailed about the changing media industry and where people are getting their information.
People are screaming in the chat, Johnny, don't, please.
Cactus Sheriff says ASMR makes my skin crawl, but Yvonne says it's no, Iwana. I blew her name pronunciation the other day, and I owe her that. Says ASMR is great. James says, Johnny, do not watch my stuff. Says Johnny, it's not working.
We want you to subscribe to the podcast and also join our Patreon.
This is getting creepy. If you've listened to this point in the show, I feel like we should send everybody a prize. Hey, in all seriousness, tomorrow's going to be a good one. Mm-hmm. We got Jody Callahoo Stonehouse joining us. That's coming up on our February 28th episode of the show, coming up on Thursday, February 29th. We're going to go live to London as we wrap here to let you know Sarah Lariniak. Remember that independent journalist does an unbelievable job. She's been covering Russia's war in Ukraine. We're going to observe it. Can you believe 2 years already? We're going to take a look at some of the work she's been doing, the frontline stories she's been telling. Alberta Budget comes out Thursday afternoon, which means Friday's Real Talk Roundtable will be dedicated to digging into the details and figuring out what those numbers mean to you. We'll see you soon.
Real Talk is hosted